A paycheck should be the finish line, not the starting line for survival. Yet for millions of America, payday disappears almost as fast as it arrived. Rent eats the biggest bite, groceries take another chunk, insurance shows up demanding its share, utilities quietly drain what's left, and before the month is halfway over, people are already calculating what bills can wait. So, why does this happen in one of the richest countries on earth? Why do so many people work full time, sometimes even two or three jobs, and still struggle to cover the basics? The answer isn't as simple as greedy companies or lazy workers. It's a tangled web of economics, productivity, inflation, housing shortages, healthcare costs, taxes, consumer expectations, automation, global competition, and government policy, and decades of decisions that have reshaped the America economy. And if someone simply says just raise everyone's pay, that sounds great on paper, but reality is far more complicated. Higher wages can absolutely improve lives, but they also affect business costs, pricing, hiring decisions, and investment. Likewise, keeping wages low may help businesses stay profitable, but it often leaves workers feeling like they're running on a treadmill that never stops. And the debate has become incredibly emotional because nearly everyone has experienced the pain in some way. Whether you're the employee wondering why 40 hours isn't enough anymore, or the small business owner wondering how to survive another payroll increase, everyone feels squeezed. And so today, we're breaking down the real reason America struggles to provide what many people consider a living wage. We're separating myths from facts and looking at both sides of the argument and explaining why there doesn't seem to be a quick fix despite decades of political promises. And by the end, you'll understand why is the issue is one of the most difficult economic challenges the economy faces today. A living wage sounds simple. It's the amount of money someone needs to cover basic necessities like housing, food, transportation, healthcare, and the modest savings without constantly falling behind. And the problem is that what counts as a living wage changes dramatically depending on where you live. A salary that provides a comfortable life in a rural Indiana might barely cover rent in San Francisco or New York City. And that means there's no single number that magically solves the problem nationwide. Housing is one of the biggest reasons wages feel inadequate. Home prices and rents have risen much faster than income in many parts of the country. Limited housing supply, zoning restrictions, population control in popular cities, and higher construction costs have all pushed prices upward. When half of a paycheck disappears into housing, everything else becomes harder to afford. Healthcare is another massive factor. Unlike many developed countries, the United States spends enormous amounts on healthcare. Employers often pay thousands of dollars per employee for insurance, which means compensation isn't just what's printed on the paycheck. And businesses frequently argue whether they're spending more than workers realize through benefits, while employees understandably focus on the money that actually reaches their bank accounts. Global competition has also changed the landscape. Companies no longer compete only with businesses across town. They're competing with manufacturers, service providers, and labor markets around the world. And if labor costs become significantly higher than competitions or competitors in other countries, companies may automate the jobs, outsource the work, or relocate the operation. And that doesn't mean every company will do it, but the possibility affects hiring decisions. Technology is another reason wages don't always rise as quickly as people expect. The automation increases the productivity, but it also changes the value of certain jobs. Self checkout machines, warehouse robots, artificial intelligence, and advanced software allow businesses to accomplish more with fewer employees. And while new technology creates entirely new industries, it can also reduce demand for certain types of labor, limiting wage growth in those fields. Small businesses face a unique challenge. Large corporations may be able to absorb higher payroll costs through massive sales volumes, but a local restaurant or family owned hardware store often operates on razor thin profit margins. And if payroll suddenly increases dramatically, owners may raise prices, reduce employee hours, delay hiring, or close altogether. And that's why many small business owners argue they support higher wages in principles, but struggle with the economics in practice. Inflation complicates everything even further, too. If wages increase but prices rise just as quickly, workers don't actually gain purchasing power. And economists call this the wage price spiral. It's one reason policymakers try to balance wage growth with overall economic stability. And nobody wants higher pay if grocery, rent, and utilities increase by the same amount. Education and job skills also influence them wages. Industries that require specialized training often pay more because qualified workers are harder to find. And jobs with larger pools of available applicants tend to experience that slower wage growth because employers have more hiring options. And that's the reality, can feel unfair, okay? But it's largely driven by supply and demand within the labor market. Government policy plays a huge role as well. Minimum wage laws, tax policies, labor regulations, trade agreements, immigration policies, housing incentives, and educational funding all influence wages either directly or indirectly. And supporters of raising the minimum wage argue it lifts the millions of workers and stimulates consumer spendings. Critics argue that if it increases, happens too quickly or without considering regional differences, businesses may reduce the hiring or invest aggressively in automation. And productivity is another piece of the puzzle. Historically, higher productivity often led to higher wages because workers produce more value. In over recent decades, however, many economists argue that productivity gains have increasingly benefited shareholders and executives rather than flowing proportionally to workers. Others counter their global competition and technological investments in changing industries make the comparison more complicated than it appears. So consumer behavior also matters. Americans consistently demand lower prices and faster delivery and greater convenience. And we celebrate discounts, free shipping, and bargain deals, but lower prices often come from reducing costs somewhere in the supply chain, including labor expenses. And in many ways, consumers unknowingly participate in the very systems they criticize because purchasing decisions reward companies that deliver the cheapest products. So, can America pay everyone a living wage? The more accurate question may be whether America can do it without creating unintended consequences somewhere else in that country or in that economy. Raising wages helps workers but increases the cost for employers. Keeping costs low benefit consumers but pressurizes the employee earnings. So expanding the government support requires additional tax revenue or borrowing. Every solution involves trade-offs, and that's why this debate has lasted for generations. And the reality is that there probably isn't one magical policy capable of solving the entire problem. Addressing housing shortages, improving the education, encouraging the productivity, controlling healthcare costs, supporting small businesses, expanding that workforce training, and promoting sustainable economic growth may collectively accomplish far more than any single law ever could. It's frustrating. Answer because people naturally want simple solutions to complicated problems, but economics rarely works that way. The challenge isn't deciding whether America deserves a living wage. Most people agree they do. And I do. I think they do. But the challenge is designing an economy where workers earn enough to live comfortably while business remain competitive, prices stay reasonably stable, and opportunities continue to grow. And finding that balance is incredibly difficult, but understanding the complexity is the first step forward, having a smarter conversation instead of simply shouting slogans from the opposite side. Thanks for watching today. If you found value in today's video, subscribe, and we'll see you guys later. Just a quick flash update on this site. Maybe it'll stick.